Hi everyone, my name is Stephen Stewart. I'm the CEO of Power Ore, and today's webinar is going to address the updates on the Opemiska copper mine complex, what we've done both technically. There's been a lot of developments since we last did the webinar, and of course we completed a financing. We did it at a very good and fair price for both our shareholders and our company, and that allows us to go forward with our drill program, which is fully permitted and ready to go. I think we're going to be drilling in May. So let's get started, run through the forward-looking statement. It's ubiquitous. You can read it on your own time. Here's the recap or the agenda for today's webinar. I'm going to give everybody an update about what Opemiska is. For those of you who have followed our story, I think you have a basic understanding, or at least maybe even a good understanding of what it is, but I'm going to repeat it for those who are new because I think it certainly warrants it. I'm going to talk about the model. We've put a lot of time, effort, investment into this geological model. There's a tremendous amount of data on the Opemiska that we have, but it's all about how we host that data and look at it in terms of a GEMCOM model, etc. And then I can show some sections. Sections are, we call them visual tools to allow both geologists and investors to get a better understanding of what this model is and how the geology flows from sort of east to west on an in situ basis. It allows us to depict the high-grade veins. It also allows us to depict the disseminated veins. It also allows us to depict what has been mined out. And obviously what's left over is the key part. I'm going to talk about our drill program. Again, fully permitted, financed, holes are planned, we're ready to go. And then our goal for the Opemiska, it's always been the same, and that's to define an economic ore body on this project. And when we achieve that goal, I think we're in really good shape because I think we've got a very robust deposit. Well, it's technically not called a deposit yet, but we've got a very robust resource in the ground. And once we define that under the 43-101 regime, people will start to take notice. And when they do, they'll realize there's this deposit that has all this infrastructure in place. It's got rail, it's got road, it's got power, it's got community support. All of these things are extremely important for base metal projects, and it's in the heart of Quebec and the Plan Nord district, which is very positive to have all that support and from the government and local community. So let's get started. I always like to start with this picture because to me this just sums up, well, it sums up what Opemiska used to be. Opemiska used to be under Falconbridge, a high-grade underground mine. In fact, there's two mines side by side, the Springer and the Perry. But when they were mining this thing, and they mined it for 40 years, they were going after what you see here, and that's basically pure metal. And the intersection there, that's 17% copper, along with a nice gold credit over 3 meters. And so those are 3-meter veins, and the veins that still exist today, and the veins that they were mining back in the day range from, you know, anywhere from a couple meters all the way up to 10 meters. Sometimes it came even wider, but within these veins you were getting these extremely high grade intersections. And so that's what the Opemiska was. And I think it's important to note that clearly we can see that mineralization is still there, and there's lots of it, and I'm going to show you how we have a very good confidence level that it is, not just through the drilling, but that mineralization is still there, and we're going to be capturing that in our open pit. Also, I think it's very important what the Opemiska is going to be, and we are envisioning the Opemiska as an open pit and not as a call it a redo of an underground mine. We are looking at this as a different way. And a key part of that is the disseminated material. And so again, the disseminated material is the material that's outside of the veins. So the veins is within the sort of the fault structure. You get these high grade 10, 20, even 30% copper within the walls to the left and the right, if you will. There's copper in those walls. It's not nearly as high grade as that, but the important thing is it carries both gold and copper, and we see that very clearly now. And so why is that important? Well, when you are trying to define an open pit, disseminated materials is important. That affects your strip ratio. And so if you think about it, you're going to be mining that wall rock anyways, so it makes a tremendous amount of difference to the project's economics if you're going to be sending that resource to the waste pile, or if you're going to be putting it through the mill and getting paid for it. So that's what the Opemiska was. It was, everybody knows, it's high-grade veins. What Opemiska is, it's still high-grade veins, but we're going to define and have been defining the disseminated zones. Again, I've shown these before, but I'm going to show them again. These are the high-grade drill results. How can they not get people's attention? 20%, 30% over sort of narrow widths, but you really get really interesting wider zones here. We get 10 meters of 6% copper, 10 meters of almost 5% copper, etc. So these intersections are not uncommon. I'll also point out how shallow they are. I won't dwell on these, though I think, because I've talked about them before, but I have to stress that grades like this are extremely rare, and to have it right in the middle of Quebec, very, very shallow, is unique. Again, I mentioned the disseminated material. This is another selection, a different type of drill results. You can see on the left, the intervals there are extremely long. We've selected a series of intervals 80 meters up to 20 meters and everywhere in between. And you can see the copper equivalents go from 2.2 or 2.5 almost to a percent copper. To have 81 meters at a percent copper from surface, and again, there's the to and the from right here in the section. It starts from 3 meters, and you get 81 meters of a percent copper, and these numbers are ran at 1270 gold and about 260 copper. So they're pretty modest that we did these calculations on. So that's a lot of copper, and that's us defining the disseminated material. Again, you go back, there's going to be some high-grade intersections, veins within this 80 meters, but it's important, and I have a slide that I'll demonstrate, it's important to note that the materials in between the vein also carries. So this is our model. We just came out with it. This is, it's a snippet of the model. I'll get it started here, and I'm going to fast track it through it because it's a little long, but what you're seeing here is the stopes. And us defining the stopes was a critical part of the exercise in terms of recreating this model and digitizing it, because this is what was mined out. So everything you see here in black is gone. It's a void. And that's what Falconbridge was busy mining for 40 years. And so obviously, when we're trying to define what this project is, that's the starting point, is to figure out what's gone. Now, what you see here in red that's the veins. And so that's what we interpret as being left over. And that's the important part. Obviously, within the red, you can see there's zones of the black that have been mined out. So those are the stopes within the veins that have been mined out. But clearly, there's an awful lot of red. And I'll note that the red only depicts the high-grade veins. We do not show the disseminated material in this particular model. We do have a block model, which I'll just fast forward here. And so I'll just pause it here to give a better view. You can see these red sections here, those are effectively the same zones you were seeing in the 3D model before. But these block models here, where you see the blue and the yellow, that is the disseminated material. So that's the wall rock which carries the copper. That's very important. And I'll just sort of fast forward through a couple more sections, etc. So these are just, again, sections of the mines that we've depicted. So I'll move on from this model, but to us, that was a very significant milestone in order to achieve and depict that. That helped us design the drill program, obviously. And it's also given us an idea of how many tons and what grade is there. So we know exactly what this resource is. We have an idea of what the 43-101 can say. Is that independently done? No, it is not. That is done by us. But I assure you that our team is as good as any of the other 43-101 independent consultants out there. Are we biased? Of course we are. But we're looking to define exactly what this resource is. So we have a good deal of confidence in what the resource is going to say, and I can tell you it's robust. So we're excited. So this is, and I talked about this, so we completed the model. You saw it in sort of the 3D, but it's much more than that. But this is some of the basic images that we've created out of that model in order to depict. And so this is sort of an outline of a pit, if you will. In fact, these represent here, the gray represents what's called the rhyolites, which we're not really interested in the rhyolite sections of it. Within here is the pyroxenites, and that's what we're going to be mining. Now, what I want to point out is, you can see these are the veins here. What's been sort of whited out with the gray, that's been mined. So those are the stopes. We showed those in black and before, but these are the veins. So there's still lots of this high grade vein area left over, which is important. Again, look at the size of these veins. We know this has been taken out here. But what I'm also going to point out is these in the dotted black with the red striped shading, those are the disseminated areas. So they're not the high grade areas. They're not the 10 and 20% copper. They're sort of like 1%, 2%, even larger or higher grades in some area, but not super high grade. And I think we define this as anything over 0.5% copper is in these zones here. And that's all, considered new material. Falconbridge never considered this. Not that they weren't necessarily aware of it, but and they may have been, they may not have been, I can't say, but I can tell you for certainty that in the context of an underground mine, mining this disseminated material at 80-cent copper or whatever the price was back in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and with the economics of an underground mine, you just can't move that type of ore economically. So I'll just run through. These are more sections. Again, I'm showing you 4 different sections here, and you can go back on our website. It's all posted on our presentation, but basically it's showing you the same thing, but it's going from east to west, huge areas disseminated. So all that stuff, if it wasn't for, again, think of this as a sort of a de facto open pit. We're trying to mine this material. If it wasn't for the disseminated, all this stuff here would be considered effectively waste. But on our new interpretation and understanding of this, we think we can send a lot of this material to the mill. And this affects your strip ratio, which is obviously a critical aspect when assessing the economics behind an open pit. This is a plan section. So these 4 sections here are just sort of slices that look down into the ground. As I said, they go from east to west. This is a little depiction, a cartoon we created. It's based off, again, the veins, but we're just trying to show where the disseminated material is. I mentioned before the rhyolites. This is an area here where we think there's an impermeable contact. They call it when 2 different types of rocks meet each other, they call it a contact. And this area here, the contact is an impermeable surface, if you will. So basically when the mineralization came in via fluids, and that's how mineralization gets deposited, it stopped right here, and we think it pooled. Okay, so we get the glory hole. So there's a huge area of very high grade mineralization here, but along these contact points is definitely where we're going to be focusing some of our drilling on the disseminated part, because we think it hit that area and it just stopped. And then there's also areas in between here. There's some in the D zones or the D type of mineralization. Those are sort of sub high grade veins that were not mined by Falconbridge. They're not necessarily disseminated, or they may have disseminated in the wall rock, but they weren't mined because they weren't wide enough, etc. But when you're looking at open pit, you're taking it all, so we want to understand what it is. So that's what that depicts. Now this, to me, is the most interesting slide that we've ever come out with. We came out with it a couple months ago. It's perhaps a touch confusing to grasp what we're trying to tell you, but this is 2 holes, okay? And this is the original hole, S26. It is 57 meters in length, and it had 1 assay, okay? This is a twinned hole, which means they tried to recreate it to, in effect, validate this hole to see if this, this data is real. And so they drilled it 3 meters to the west, and I'll note that this hole starts right from surface, and the mineralization starts right from surface. And so going back to this S26 hole, again, single assay. Why? Because they saw the mineralization. Just like in the first slide, it's very easy to see the copper. So they just didn't bother mining the other stuff because the wall rock doesn't look highly mineralized, and it wasn't economic in the context of underground mining, so they just didn't mine it. And so anyways, the previous owner went back and twinned this hole, and we can see that it lines up. So when it's maybe 6-7 meters or maybe 10 meters below, it hits that vein, and this hole, it blows out to 25% copper, and you can see other assays here. When they drilled this 90-meter hole, what they did is they assayed every single meter individually. So it's called a composite. And so we can see in every meter that's represented here, we can see 1%. Sometimes it goes out to 3-4%, 2%, 2%, 3, etc., etc. So what this hole shows is that the entire hole is mineralized. Do we get super mineralization up here in these veins? Yes, but this other wall rock material is quotes unquote disseminated throughout. And so what this does is this yielded an 81-meter intersection at over 1% copper equivalent. To me, that's game-changing holes. That is going to be part of our objective in this drill program, is to continue to define this disseminated material. When we do that, you know, going back to our sections here, we're trying to grow these red shaded areas into, you know, I'm not going to say how much, obviously Mother Nature will control that, but that is our objective, is to further define that, because the previous drilling on the Opemiska wasn't going for the disseminated material, it was going for the high grade zones. Are we going to go after more high grade zones? Certainly. We'll intersect them as we go through the disseminated material, as they did here. But it's about growing the disseminated material, growing the tons, provided the cutoff grade is met. Also want to point out that what is a crown pillar? And so a lot of this high grade drilling here, so I'll go back just again. Said I wasn't going to harp on it, but I lied. So this high grade drilling, you'll notice how shallow it is here. So from 5 meters, from 8 meters, 30 meters, 15. So it's very, very shallow mineralization. Okay. And so why that's so important is because all that rock is still there. It was never mined. So Falconbridge, when they were mining it underground, you have to leave anywhere in the crown pillar on Opemiska is anywhere from 30 to 60 meters. So that's basically the ceiling, the top level, and they have to leave that rock there so that the mine doesn't collapse on itself. So it's for safety. Every underground mine has them. So why is that so important? Because these veins come right to surface. So that means right from your feet down to the bottom of the crown pillar, which I said ranges from anywhere from 30 to 60 meters, that rock is still there. Those high grade veins were never mined. And so that's a huge bonus for us in an open pit, because it's high grade material. It's the stuff that gets mined first and you get paid back on it. So that's why I want to emphasize the crown pillar is still there. This is what it represents. So, you know, this is where they started to mine those veins, and there's still, even the stuff they mined, we know there's stuff left over, including the disseminated, but all this rock here, 30 to 60 meters, is virgin rock. That's a big deal. Okay, so moving forward, drill program, we're very excited to do it. We've spent a lot of time on this model, which helped us to design exactly where we want to put these holes. It's starting in May. We're trying to get out there as soon as possible. We have to, it's been a long winter, and we have to wait until some of the snow thaws. And keep in mind, Chapay is quite a bit further north than down in Toronto. So even though it's no snow here, there's still lots of snow up there. So we're just waiting for the snow to clear. We'll be on the ground. We expect it's going to take us 45 days, start to finish, to do 3,500 meters. We've got two objectives in this particular drill program, and I assure you, this is the first of a lot of drill programs on this. But the objective behind this is to validate the database. So we're going to be doing some more twinned. There's been lots of twinning done. We're going to do some more ourselves to give ourselves comfort in the quality of the data that exists. So that's part one. Part two is to expand the resource as we now know it. As I said, we've completed the model. We know exactly, well, exact is not the right word, but we have a good deal of confidence in what this resource is, what's left over, what grades there are, how many tons, and as I said, it's robust. There was previous work done on RPA. They did a fine job, but we've done a better job because we've had a better budget and we were much more detailed. So, and I think that our numbers are going to show that, again, the resource is robust, and I'll leave it at that. So, in terms of expansion, it's going to be the disseminated, but also the high-grade veins. And ultimately, it's going to help us get to our ultimate goal, which is to publish Opemiska's first 43-101 report after the drill campaign. That'll be composed of the new drilling. Obviously, if the validation of the earlier data works out via the twinned holes, and we think it will, and there's a lot of reasons for that, we will incorporate all of Falconbridge's work in our 43-101. So that's effectively our goal. After we publish that resource report, which I define as defining the geology, or at least the first step of the geology, then we're going to move towards a PEA. And a PEA is a desktop study. There's big margin for error in that, but it's the first pass at the economics. And we think that the number will show quite robust numbers, because Again, this is just an overview of the infrastructure that's available. So once we define an economic ore body on the Springer, and we're just talking about the open pit right now, but there's still more on the Perry. I haven't even discussed the Perry, but trust me, there's lots of mineralization left there. Just look at the infrastructure. We've got, the 113 highway. It's paved highway, runs right through it. We've got the CN rail right here. This is a spur, runs right to our property. There is power on the property. We've got community right there. We've got community support. And I think where you are sort of in this area of Quebec, it's mining and forestry. Those are the two major job drivers of growth, economic prosperity. I think the communities up there are by and large supportive of mining. Obviously, mining has to be done right in this day and age, and I think everybody knows and understands that. And so that's the only way to do business these days. So given that, I think there's a good chance we could develop a mine here. So I'll leave it at that for now. Again, my name is Stephen Stewart. I'm available at these contacts here via email or telephone. Happy to answer any questions, but I'll wrap it up, and I thank you for your time, and you'll hear from us again in the near term. Thank you.